Morning, everyone. Welcome across Hampshire and West Sussex and East Sussex and Essex and bits of Buckinghamshire and quite a bit of London as well. So the tricky bit of the Easter holiday is that everyone's Easter holiday started at a different time. So some of you are in week one, some of you are in week two. Hope you've had a good week one, those of you that have had a week of holiday already. Hope that you're preparing and excited for your first week, if it's your first week. And our mission this morning is to tell you how to manage your revision in the most impactful way possible over the course of the next couple of weeks, and also at the same time manage your well-being. And they are part of the same package. We need to manage our brain's worry system. We need to build great well-being every day to get the most out of our brain's learning network. And there's naturally going to be a bit of worry in your brain about GCSEs or A-levels because you haven't done them before. So I'm going to cut my video feed now just so the slides are as tidy as possible. So our mission this morning is to manage that final phase of prep. What we don't want to happen is we don't want you to waste your time. When you sit to revise, we want you to make that as impactful as possible. And if we work with the way our brain works, that is really going to help us do that. And it is really, as it always is, but specifically now, about our choices. You might be a student listening to this, and there are loads of you online this morning. It's great to see so many of you, and there'll be loads of you watching this recording. Whether you're listening to the recording or listening to this live, whether you've started your revision or whether you've not started your revision, you can make a difference. We have got time. There will be circuits in your brain that will tell you that there isn't time now, there's no point. That's not true. In fact, a lot of the stuff the brain tells us is not true. Brains are prediction engines, and they will predict negatively. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So the choices we make about our daily behaviors affect what happens in our lives. And that is important in terms of belief. Be in no doubt that you can do this. It is tricky. GCSEs are complicated. A-levels even more so, but it's about managing our daily experiences, particularly around revision, and that's what the focus of today is about, but also about well-being, because our brains change on the basis of what we use them for. That's clear from the neuroscience, really clear from the neuroscience. Whatever we do each day affects the nature of our brain, the connections that it establishes, the memories that we form. And if we keep going back to certain memories, we reinforce and strengthen those memories and behaviors. So brains and bodies work like this. Whatever we do with them, they get better at doing that thing. That could be a positive thing, like learning key ideas for our GCSEs. That could be a negative thing, fretting and worrying about GCSEs, building up the worry circuits, and therefore experiencing lots of threat and concern about the future. Your brain is incredible. You've got 300 trillion connections. If we counted them at a rate of 1 a second, it would take us 9.5 million years to count all of them. It's an incredible organ. That pink wrinkly bit is the bit that's going to pass exams. But in the middle of the brain are systems that are designed to keep us safe from threats, and they can kick off in preparation for exams and reduce the cognitive bandwidth we've got available. So it is not too late. You can absolutely do this. You just need to work your brain in a particular way and acknowledge that you're not always going to want to study. And we'll talk a bit about that later as well. So over the course of this webinar, we're going to be looking at managing the brain's worry system. We're going to be looking at building the Staley study habit around things called study reps. And we're going to be looking at planning your well-being. So some of you have been working with us for ages and know about the basic study habit that we teach all students at secondary and post-16 colleges and at universities as well. It's around spending a little bit of time each day capturing learning, because learning is not one process, it's three. So these features, study habit via the study capture sheet, the flashcards and mind maps, are key components of the study reps for the Easter holidays. And if you haven't built the study habit yet, that's fine. You can still build it when you go back to school. But at this point, we need to design our own self-directed study slots. And we need to design it around brain science. We tell ourselves a bunch of guff about how we can't possibly revise in that way, that it doesn't work for us this way, and that we learn in this particular way. All brains learn in pretty much the same way. Memory is not stored in a bank. It is the refiring of neurons that fired during the original event. And the way to keep those events live in our memory is to use them. If we use them, they then send signals, chemical messengers effectively across the brain to the hippocampus, which means that those memories are encoded and strengthened. So memory is what's left over after thinking. So we need to spend a little bit of time each day thinking about specific subjects and areas that we want strengthened for our exams. If we don't think about them, they won't end up in our long-term memory. So in designing the study reps I'm about to talk about, we've thought very hard about how to make the learning process occur in a short, focused, effective way as possible. But we need to understand that learning is three processes. Learning is, first of all, the brain modeling the key idea that we're learning. It might be about how conduction works in heat. It might be about the rise of the Nazis in 1930s Germany. Whatever it is, we need to be able to model that information in our brains and understand it. And that often occurs, obviously, in lessons, but it doesn't have to occur in lessons. We can help ourselves to understand it and model the ideas. Once we've got it, once we've understood it, we then need to build it into the structure of our brain by practicing it or parts of it. And then we need to recall it from our memories and apply it, which is obviously what we're doing in exams. But applying it, using it, is a key part of the learning process. So learning is a process, not a single event. So the best analogy for this is building fitness. If you wanted to build fitness, you'd rock up and do exercise on a regular basis. You wouldn't do exercise for 6 or 7 hours a day. You'd maybe do it for 45 minutes to an hour, and then you'd have a rest, and you'd maybe pick it up the next day. You'd certainly have a rest day, but you'd keep doing the exercises that you needed to do to strengthen whatever areas of the body that you were trying to strengthen, be it that fitness or core strength or whatever. In relation to the brain, remembering that the memory is constructed live, how does the brain determine what's important? How does it determine what we need to hold in it? It works on the basis of neuronal use. So whichever neurons are used most in the day, those get encoded, because our brain is designed, it's a design feature, designed to forget 70% of its experiences each day. When you're doing your revision, imagine what you're doing. You are changing the chemistry at gaps between neurons. And these gaps are called synapses. We're literally building proteins in these gaps. And as we practice initially, it's going to be hard. And that's represented by this electrical impulse on the left, moving down this neuron. Practice and revision begin as hard, but as we repeat and repeat and repeat, the information conveys more quickly. And for one neuron, read 10,000 neurons. For a key idea, say for GCSEs or A-levels, loads and loads of neurons are going to be involved in interconnected pathways strengthened across synapses. So repetition is the key aspect of revision that we're going to engage in over the course of the Easter holidays. If the subject's interesting to us, that's going to help, but repetition is key. If we don't repeat, our brain will delete. So today we're going to teach you how to build a self-directed study slot, what to put into it, why you should do it that way, and how to do it. We'll also talk about the brain's worry system and how to build great well-being, because they all connect together. So the overview of the slot, the self-directed study slot, is this. We're going to share with you a document called a study tracker. And if you haven't already got that document, just email us. My email address is andrewwright@aypuk.com, and I'll send you a template to use. It's a Google Sheet you can copy. So you're going to get a study tracker, which is one tab on that Google spreadsheet, an audit for engaging and effortful subjects, another tab on that spreadsheet, a wellbeing planner, and a study reps builder. And we're going to look through that document now and explain how all the bits link together. Remember, this has been put together using brain science, using the importance of spacing our practice over time, interleaving our subjects in a way that means that we're not just sticking to one subject. All of this process increases and amplifies the learning process. So one of the sheets, the first tab, is all about tracking your study. And this is really important. The study rep structure we're going to suggest involves focusing on 2 subjects a day in particular slots. And I'll explain those slots in a second. But the study tracker document does exactly what it says. It tracks your study. So you choose a subject, say, for example, it's biology. You choose a topic, say genetics, and then you choose a particular aspect of that subject, and you log on your study tracker those details. Then you choose a different subject, say history, a different topic, the rise of the Nazis, and a bit more detail. And then on the far right-hand side of that spreadsheet, you'll see those columns. How did you do? You red, amber, green, your understanding of that topic, and you red, amber, green, your understanding of the second subject. The length of time you're going to do that subject for, we'll talk about in a minute. The purpose of the study tracker is to do 2 things. First of all, log what you've looked at so you can keep track of that and help you work out where you are in relation to your understanding of that subject. The second aspect is a motivational one for you to look up the list, because as you're doing revision, sometimes it's hard for it to feel like it's making a difference. But over time, it really builds up. And just looking back up your study tracker, you'll see we've got 4 weeks before the exams start. In some cases, depending on when your exams start, it might be as many as 5 or 6 weeks. So if you did this every day, the self-directed study slot we're talking about is 90 minutes. The impact you would have would be enormous in that time. And there are rest days built in. So what that study tracker looks like filled in is an example here. This is from the middle of March, working with a student. And this is what they did. They focused in that first Monday on English, Macbeth. They looked at characters and motivations. Then they looked at physics, they looked at heat transfer, and they used a video to do that. I'll explain exactly how the reps work in a minute and exactly how long they are. But the study tracker is there to help you track your study. The next tab on the sheet is all about planning your well-being. And you'll know that we talk about the importance of the 12 rocks of well-being and planning them in every day. The bottom of the well-being planner is all about what we call the Gladden framework, which is just a way of balancing the brain's moany, drony and groany negative biases by reminding ourselves of the positive things that happened, what we learned today, what we've achieved today, what delighted us today, what positive emotion we experienced, and what new experiences we had. Just logging those each day is a very powerful way of just reminding our brain that there are some positive things, because it's very good at being negative. And then the well-being planner, it says what and when at the top. What are you going to do? I'm going to watch that film. I'm going to go for a cycle with my mates. I'm going to pop into town and have a coffee with that friend. You make a note and you plan it. Your planning of your well-being is as important as the planning of your study. A brain that is well rested, a brain that is looking after itself, that's getting enough sleep, that's eating healthily, that's doing a bit of exercise, that's walking outside, is a brain that's in a good space to unleash the incredible potential of the learning brain. So well-being alongside study, and our recommendation would be get study done in the morning and then have the rest of the day for well-being. Some institutions, none of the ones we're working with, but some institutions are suggesting like hours and hours and hours and hours of study, like, you know, the length of a school day. That's ineffective, because if you think about a school day, you're not just doing one thing all day, you're moving around, you've got PE lessons. It's really important for the brain to have a variety of different activities, and attention generally drops off a cliff after about 30 minutes. So those are the 12 rocks of well-being. If you haven't got that checklist, go to our website, actionyourpotential.org, and you can download a copy and stick it on your fridge. Don't forget the importance of sleep. Sleep for memory formation, sleep for calming the anxious brain. The amygdala, the center of the brain's worry system, fires 60% more if we haven't had enough sleep. Sleep is a fundamental part of your revision. And when we go to sleep, the hippocampus refires the neurons that we used most during the day, forming those memories. That's why that hour and a half of study repetition, the study reps, is incredibly important, because your brain will refire those each day because you're doing them each day. Don't forget the power of getting up and having a walk outside. Sunshine on your face resets your biological clock, makes sleep easier, helps you build vitamin D, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Really powerful. Look at the impact of walking over the course of minutes through to an hour and a half. It has a huge impact. A long walk each day reduces the number of depressive thoughts we have just because it causes different networks in the brain to fire. Don't forget, you're building the connections across your brain. You're encoding the structure. And remember, if you don't look after your well-being, you will get ill. You'll get physically or mentally unwell unless you make time for your well-being every day. And we would say 12 hours of a 24-hour period should be focused on well-being. 8 hours of that is sleep. And remember the importance of planning your day. Study in the morning, well-being in the afternoon. Okay, so let's look at those study reps in a bit more detail. And this gets a bit nerdy. Apologies for that. So the final sheet that on that study tracker is all about how the study reps are structured. And I'll walk you through that. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention some stuff around engaging in effortful subjects. So there's a sheet as part of the study tracker, which just asks you to list the subjects that you find quite interesting and engaging, and therefore subjects you remember more stuff of, and subjects that you find less interesting and engaging, the ones that are harder for you. It doesn't mean you can't do them. It just means you're less interested in them. And a brain that's less interested finds it harder to remember that stuff, because not only has it got to remember it, we've also got to use some of our bandwidth to focus our attention. So we need to be clear what the effortful subjects are before we embark on study reps, because we're probably going to need to do those effortful subjects more often. I just want to mention the leaps in learning briefly. These are the daily behaviors that support great learning. And these three at the top here, chunking it, quizzing it, and desirable difficulties, they are key leaps in learning. So chunking it acknowledges that little and often is the best way of building memory. Spacing our practice out improves and accelerates the speed of learning. And interleaving means different subjects back to back, swapping the different subjects you're doing, because that activates different neurons and makes cross connections between those links. Quizzing it is the importance of testing and questioning yourself about the knowledge, and we're going to come to that in a second. And then all of those things together are what's called desirable difficulties. Effectively, if it's hard, that's good. If you're going to the gym to lift weights that you've lifted before, you're not actually changing anything. You're continuing to maintain your fitness, but you're not building muscle. If that was your intention, you're not going to build muscle without a desirable difficulty. And it's the same with learning. If it's hard, that's a good example of your brain learning, reorganizing resources to connect different circuits in order to help us remember stuff. So how does the study rep work? So study reps are ultimately 3 strips of 30 minutes. And I'm going to walk you through each rep now. And each rep represents some aspect of that getting it, practicing it, and using it in terms of the learning as a process. So on the study tracker, this is how it works. The reps are around 25 minutes to 30 minutes long. So the first thing you do for 5 minutes is you note on your study tracker the subject and the topic that you're going to look at. And then you spend some time with a resource and with either flashcards or a mind map or a piece of paper, noting the information from the resource. So I'll make it specific. Let's give an example. And we've given an example here of Cognito video. If you Google Cognito, COGNITO, YouTube channel Cognito, there's loads of maths and YouTube science videos there. They're very helpful. So the first bit of your rep is noting it on your study tracker. Then you choose a resource. So in this case, we're going to look at variation and evolution in biology. That's the resource we're going to use. We're going to watch that video, which is about 5 minutes long, a couple of times. And as we're watching that video, we're going to make flashcards or a mind map about that topic. And as we're doing it, we're going to add any other information that we remember from our lessons. So 5 minutes to note it on the tracker, and then 9 minutes and 9 minutes. So about 18 minutes in total, around 18 to 20 minutes, looking at the video and making flashcards or a mind map, then stopping, getting up and moving about. It's really important to stop briefly, not get stuck on your phone, not get stuck playing a game, but just get up and move about, empty the dishwasher, make a coffee, have a biscuit, and get up and move about. That's about 30 minutes. That's the first rep done. Second rep. This time you're focusing on a different subject. So in that first example, we're looking at science, we're looking at biology. This time we're looking at English in this example. Again, you note it on your tracker. It goes in those two middle columns where you're looking at topic 2 and subject 2. Then this time we're going to focus on English, and we're going to look at one of our literature texts, say Inspector Calls or Macbeth, and we're going to summarize some information about characters. And we might watch a video to do that. We might have a revision guide in front of us to do that. We might use our notes from our school book to do that. And we're going to build a mind map where we collect together and connect together information about that particular aspect of the text. And then that's going to take us around 20 minutes or so. And then we're going to get up and move about. And obviously, the subjects and the topics are your choices. But for each subject, you're going to need a resource. It might be a video. It might be a worksheet from school. It might be a revision guide. It might be your notes. It might be access to GCSE Pod, the videos that you've got on there if your school's got access to those. You'll need a resource and a piece of paper or some flashcards to help you use that resource to practice and check your understanding. Okay, then you move in. So you've done 2 strips of 30 minutes and you've had 5-minute breaks in the middle of those as well. Then you move to the final bit of the rep, which is then testing or quizzing yourself on the information. And at this point, this close to the exams, the best way of quizzing yourself is to use a past paper and the mark scheme. So you will hopefully know which exam board your subjects are in. Often for science, for example, it's AQA or Edexcel. You have access via lots of different websites. There's an excellent website called getrevising.co.uk, and you can access all the past papers and all the mark schemes on that website. What you want to do is, for whatever topic that you are going to be doing, you need to find a question that relates to that topic for both of those earlier reps. So for the biology, you need a question about genetics and evolution. And for the English, you need a question about Inspector Calls or Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. And you have a go at that question for between 8 to 10 minutes. You just have a go at the question. And then you look at the mark scheme, and it's not cheating because you had a go, and then you're going to add in any additional information, maybe in a different color, to your answer. And you spend about 10, 12 minutes doing that. And then you do the same for the second subject that you were looking at. So in the example we've just talked about, the first question would be a biology question, and you'd have a go at that question, and then you'd fill in details from the mark scheme. And then the second question would be the English question, and you'd have a go at the question, and then you fill in details from the mark sheet. And then in the final 10 minutes of that last bit of the rep, you plan tomorrow's session. So you say, well, today I looked at biology, tomorrow I'm going to look at physics, I'm going to look at electricity, I'm going to use that video, I'm going to use flashcards again. And then I'm going to look at history tomorrow because we looked at English today, and I'm going to look at Nazi Germany. I'm going to use that resource. So you get it all set up, and you find the question and the mark scheme for those topics that you're going to look at, and the question and the mark scheme for those topics. So you get it all set up for the next day, and then you go and do your well-being, because when you rock up the next day, it's all set up. Because what can often happen is we arrive and then we faff around for 15 minutes saying, what am I going to do? If you've set it up beforehand, that's going to make a huge difference. Build it slowly. If you're doing this for the first time, do that first 30 minutes on day 1, do that second 30 minutes on day 2, do the recall phase on day 3, and then day 4, do the whole thing together. If you've already started your revision, just do your 90 minutes, your first study, your second study, and then your recall section, and build it that way. Right, the last thing I want to talk about in the last 5 minutes is motivation. So this is Leap in Learning 5, which is about don't wait to want to revise. We're trying to build motivation systems in your brain. There are 2 sorts of motivation in your brain, both driven by the reward-seeking chemical dopamine. There's have-to motivation, and want to motivation. And have to motivation is difficult stuff. I have to do this. I don't necessarily want to do this. That pertains to aspects of study and many aspects of adult life. So we need to build that have to motivation system. It's all based on dopamine, and dopamine is produced in the brainstem and moves through channels in the brain. It's called a neuromodulator. So it changes the nature of the way the brain is firing when we're seeking particular rewards in the environment. So if we're seeking cake or an opportunity to play video games with our mates, that's easy motivation. And what happens is the dopamine arrives in the middle of the brain, the emotional areas of the brain. We want to do that, we do that, and we get the reward. For reward-seeking behaviors that involve longer-term goals, for example, doing well in our GCSEs, getting on that college course, doing well in our A-levels and getting to university or getting that technical apprenticeship we want, then we're going to need the dopamine to travel much further, and the reward is in the future. So the reward is the opportunity to reach for the things that we want, but we're not going to feel as good while we're doing those have to activities as we are when we're eating cake. So want to and have to activities have different feelings associated with them. But if you build the have to pathway regularly, you will get that sense of that progress towards a reward. And using things like the study tracker, you'll see live the progress that you're making. And if you don't do the have to activities, where do you end up? You end up feeling guilty. You end up feeling worried. You end up spending a lot of the free time that you've got fretting about the fact you didn't do the study that you needed to do. So I want to motivation nice and easy. I have to motivation much harder, but we're building skills. We're building connections. We're building the ability to delay our gratification into the future. And anything that is important and significant in life is going to involve work and striving and effort, but not for hours and hours and hours, short bursts. And study and learning, while some aspects are great fun, there are many aspects that are a have-to activity. But if you look into the adult world, you'll see there are have-to activities everywhere. So what we want is you to plan your day in a way that means you get your study done, you have your well-being activities planned, you still have time to do all those things, but you manage your day in an effective way that you don't feel guilty about. There are only ultimately two pains in life. There's the pain of the effort to get the thing that we want to happen in our lives, or there's the pain of regretting that we didn't do the things that we needed to do. Remember, as you're doing this, there's no boss circuit in your brain. That's why well-being is so important. That's why willpower is a skill. Our brain is set up like a team of rivals. Different circuits do different jobs, and they can end up in opposition with each other, arguing with each other. So I want to study, but I want to watch Netflix. I want to go out with my mates. I really should study. The arguments that go on across our brain when you're making a decision, your brain argues with itself. So we need to help our brain to get stuff done. Think of your brain like the House of Parliament. It's really noisy in there, particularly when there's conflict between different circuits about what we're doing. So we really need to study, but we really want to go out because it's sunny day and I've been at school all week and it's not fair. That whole kind of argument that your brain goes into. At the front of the brain is an area, a bit like the Speaker of the House, that calls it to order. That's called the prefrontal cortex. And we can't wait to want to study because those circuits at the back are going to be arguing about studying. If we plan a study slot each day and do it every day, it'll make it easier and easier for the prefrontal cortex to make that happen. We need to look after our prefrontal cortex. The 12 rocks of well-being look after the prefrontal cortex, make it much easier. Habits really help the prefrontal cortex to get more stuff done every day. If you don't plan each day, our brain uses pre-existing structures and wastes time. Okay, we have just about reached the end. The final thing I wanted to say was, first of all, wow, thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Have a fantastic Easter. Remember, you are not alone. Currently across the nation, 500,000 students are preparing for their GCSEs and around 300,000 are preparing for their A-levels and a similar number for their university exams. And that doesn't count all the adults doing different study as part of their work. You are not alone. This is the secret of studying. You need to build the study reps every day. You need to plan your well-being every day. Both those activities will calm your brain's worry system. Thanks so much for joining us today, and good luck with the GCSEs and the A-levels. We are here throughout the holidays. In fact, I'm about to dash off and do a one-to-one with a student right now. Take care, everyone. Look after yourselves.